Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to start by creating a new composition. And we're going to just click on the new composition button. When we do that, we can just call this, we're just going to call this Liberty, which is kind of a giveaway of the sources that I'm using, but we're going to call it Liberty. We're going to leave it set at HDTV 1080, which is 1920 by 1080 pixels and 30 frames a second, roughly. We're also going to leave this set to a 30-second duration. We might not use all this time. And then this resolution of half, third, or quarter, depending on how well your system previews the video, I would suggest half or third. If you have a really fancy, nice desktop, go full all the way. If you've got a really junky old laptop, try quarter. And so I'm going to hit OK. Half seems to work well for me. And so once I do this, this is my composition. It may be much larger in your window. You can zoom in and out on this using a scroll wheel on a mouse if you've got one. I believe 2 fingers on your trackpad will also do that, yes. And you can also adjust that here. You can click to fit, which means no matter what I do to the dimensions of this window, that it'll automatically adjust. And right now I'm going to leave it at, I'm just going to put it at 100%. That's going to be too big, so I'm going to just say 50% right now, just so there's a nice boundary around there. And then I'm going to need to import some assets that I want to use. What we're going to do is I found this photograph of a cowboy in Montana, and there's a nice skyline behind him, and so Lady Liberty from a drawing is going to march across that skyline and then go behind the cowboy. And so we'll look at how to do all of those things. So here we go. And in the process, we're going to learn how to keyframe position, rotation, and a couple other settings on our layers. So I'm going to go ahead and double click to do this. And I need these 2 assets here. I need cowboy and I need the flaglady.psd. And I'm going to hold down Command to select both of those. We're going to input them as, we could either input them as footage or compositions and retain layer sizes. I'm going to choose composition and retain layer sizes. This way, specifically for the flaglady.psd, it means that because I actually cut her out from a larger image, the boundaries around her will be closer to her body rather than elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and say retain layer sizes, and I'm going to hit open. And when I do that, I get a bunch of options here. So the flaglady file was a Photoshop document, and so that gives me both a composition that I could work with, but it also gives me the layers, right? So I actually have the layer of her, which is what I'm interested in. I'm not really interested in the rest of this. Whereas the cowboy is just a JPEG, so it's just going to come in as an image. So let's start by putting the cowboy in there. I'm just going to click and drag, drop him down here. And then I'm going to start by scaling this image up pretty significantly. And so when I start doing that, I can do it with these handles. Note that I have to hold down Shift to make it scale uniformly. And so I'm going to scale this up, and then you'll notice like I'm hitting a hard limit as how far I can do, and that's because of where my screen ends. And so if I want to keep doing this manually, what I need to do is zoom out on my composition so I can actually see a little bit more of the space around it. Hold down Shift, select it, click, and then hold down Shift to do this squarely. And I'm just going to pull this out until the edge of that, until I get as much skyline as possible. I'm going to drag this down so we see his face. Now, this is not intended to be patriotic in any way, shape, or form. It was just the first 2 images I came across that had any had what I was looking for in them. This is all about efficiency. It's not about some rugged American image, although both of them are such images of America. It's kind of funny. All right, so I've got this cowboy, and so Lady Liberty is going to come marching in here. So let's go ahead and grab her. Now what we're going to do is open up that flag lady layers, and we're going to grab the layer 1. And we're just going to drag that 1 layer down, and we want to have it on top of the cowboy image, so that means we need to have that blue line above the cowboy.jpg, right? So now she's on top of there, and I've already cut her out from a background, so her background is transparent. And then I'm going to go ahead and when I select her, right, you'll see that actually what I was hoping is that this would shrink down. I think I did the wrong import. Right, so I did the wrong import. So what that means is that the entire size of the composition is here. If I go and import this again, I'm just going to leave that in there. I'm going to go to flaglady.psd, and I'm going to go down to straight composition. I'm going to hit open. And I'm going to say it doesn't really matter. And now, so I'll have flaglady2 and I'll have flaglady2 layers, right? It's the same file. It's just a different reference. So let's see what happens now when I grab this. Let's see if I pull this one down, if I get a different result. Okay, so you can see in this new one that's on here, now this box is much smaller than the original. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the original layer that I put in there by selecting the name and just hitting delete, and that will get rid of it. It's still available here, but it's out of our composition. Okay, so now she's way too big. So the first thing I'm going to do is scale her down. Now I can scale her down by clicking on her. I can also click on here. I could also numerically scale her down by opening up these controls and using scale here, right? And just dragging down until she looks like she's about the size she needs to be to wander. And I'm going to click and drag on her to move her position over because it's just a lot easier. And I want her just right off the screen to start with, and including the flag. And now I'm so far out I need to be a little bit further in, so I'm going to go ahead and go to 50%. There we go. I can still grab everything and everything works. Fantastic. Okay, so she's out there. I'm going to pull her onto screen just for a little bit so we can see a couple things. And so there's all of these settings here. The anchor point is the center point in the center here. When she's walking along this edge, I'm going to want to rotate her so she kind of follows the curvature, like her body tips as she goes downhill across towards the horse. And so to do that, I want her to be able to rotate essentially here along the bottom of her skirt. So what I need to do is I need to move this point. In order to move that point, I need to use what's called the pan behind tool. The quick key is the letter Y on the keyboard, and it's this option here. You'll notice it says anchor point inside the brackets. And that allows us to move the anchor point without moving anything else. So I can just drag this down somewhere close to center and just right there on the edge of her dress. Okay, so this is going to then, when I go to rotate, right, she's going to rotate around that point instead of around the center of her body. Now I'm going to need to switch back to the selection tool in order to move her around. And the selection tool is the letter V on the keyboard, or it's this arrow up here. And so I'm going to go ahead and drag her off screen again. Now, once I do that, I'm actually going to close up this little drop-down window here because there's a lot of quick keys in After Effects that can make it a lot easier to see what's going on and only be able to see the thing that you're interested in changing. So if I'm interested in keyframing position, I can hit the letter P on the keyboard, and that, for whatever layer I have selected, it will pop open the position. If I wanted to move the position of both of these layers, I can hold down Shift on both of them and hit the letter P, and it'll pop up position for both layers, and I can move them, I think, together. Yes, right, they move the same number of units together, which I don't want to do right now, but I just wanted you to know that that is a possibility. If I want all the settings again, I just flip this closed and flip it back open. Okay, so I want to be able to keyframe her position, so I'm going to turn on keyframing for her position. I also know that I'm going to want to be able to keyframe her rotation. And so I'm going to hit the letter R for rotation, and that's going to pop this up, and I'm going to keyframe that. Now, I know that I want rotation and position up. There's another key, quick key, the letter U, which allows me to see all of the options that I have keyframes turned on for in a layer. So if I hit the letter U, position and rotation show up. And so now I can start keyframing her motion across the screen. So what I'm going to do is, I've already got the keyframe set for frame 0. So I'm going to move about half a second ahead right now. Actually, yeah, no, about a second ahead, right? Somewhere between here and 2. And if you want to zoom in, you can, right? So you get a little bit more resolution on your timeline. And I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag to set her new position. So a second in, I kind of want her to be right about here, right? And so what you're going to see is that there's this line that is formed, and this is her line of motion from the start to this next keyframe that I've got. And so now the next thing I want to do is I want to adjust her rotation, right? And so to do that, there is a rotate tool up here. It's the letter W, or this tool. So if I click on that, then I can just click, oops, I can select her, and I can click somewhere on her where she's visible, and I can adjust that rotation. Now, I might have wanted her to be rotated at the beginning, but we don't know that yet because we haven't really done too much with this. So let's go ahead, and now we can use this playhead to scroll backwards and see how she does. Now you'll notice, right, it's lagging, right? And so what I need is these preview frames to be, she's actually, I really like the way she's moving. We need these preview frames to be generated, and you'll see that as I scroll back and forth, they do get generated. I can also just hit the space bar to play through my composition, and then that will generate all those previews as well. So now I'm going to play that, right? Okay, so she's very smoothly moving to this first point. So, right, she's going to go down here, and then she's going to come up again. So, you know, I want to maybe go about, instead of a full second, maybe 20 frames. And then once I'm in that position, I'm going to hit the letter V on the keyboard or click on that arrow up at the top. And I'm going to go ahead and drag her forward a little bit. Now, with all the pixelation that's occurring, it's a little annoying. But it works. And I might go ahead and, while I'm here, rotate her a touch as well. Just a little bit, so she's a little bit more upright. Okay. And then I'm just going to keep going. There's a little rise here, and then I'm going to have her kind of just go straight across until she's on top of the horse over here. So we're just going to keep going, and that little rise, I'm just going to go ahead and say maybe it's another 10 frames ahead. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the letter V, so I'm using, or click on this arrow, so I'm controlling her position. And I'm just going to scoot over just a little bit and go up a touch. There we go. And you'll see that it is automatically creating gentle curves in this as I do this. It's not just straight linear. There's actually a little bit of curvature. And there's some handles here we'll talk about in the future that allows you to change that a little bit as well. So there she is. And then I'm just going to say maybe it's another second. And this is like a really slow motion walk, but another second, and she's going to go all the way over here. All right, and my machine is running slow, probably because I'm also trying to record this at the same time, and hopefully this didn't just crash. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so now what I want is, I really want her to be behind the horse, not in front of the horse. And so we're going to introduce one other concept as part of this. So first, let's go ahead and save this. Something to note is it's always good to save After Effects projects all the time, because it does have a tendency to crash, especially if you're doing a lot of like intense stuff, kind of like Cinema, or kind of like Premiere. Okay, so now what we need to do is get another layer where this horse can be on top of Lady Liberty. And so to do that, we are going to duplicate this layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command or Control C and Command or Control V. Once I've duplicated the layer, I'm going to go ahead and put this layer up above Lady Liberty. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be creating a mask. I'm essentially going to be cutting part of this image out so it's invisible, right? And in order to see kind of where I need to do that, I'm actually going to I'm going to adjust the opacity on this layer so I can see Lady Liberty behind here. And to get to the opacity setting, you just have the layer selected, you hit the letter T for opacity. I don't know why, but that's what it is. And I'm just going to go ahead and set this to 50% for the time being, just so I can see. Okay, so really, right, she needs to be behind the horse's head, and it doesn't really matter what happens, you know, below this point, right? This could either be visible or not. But so I've got this layer selected, and now I need to create a mask. And to create a mask, I'm going to use the pen tool. I could also use the rectangle tool, but the pen tool in this case is going to be the fastest option I've got. And so to create this mask, what I want to do is I'm going to want to cut out wherever Lady Liberty is going to be, which is in this general area. And so the only place that's really important to get close to right is by the horse's head. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a bunch of little tiny points here that I'm not even clicking and dragging to make curves. I'm just going for what's it called? For speed at this point, right? We can always go back and fix this and clean it up and make it better. But I just want to make sure that I get all of this. And then once I get out here, right, this mask can be pretty big. It can go all the way outside the bounds, right? It just needs to I just want to make sure that she is covered up. Okay, so I've created this mask. Now you'll see that, right, it's doing the opposite of what I want it to do. The horse is, basically, this is the only part of the layer that's visible right now. So I open up this drop-down arrow. I see that I can see mask 1. That the color pink here is also this outline. If I was to create another mask on this layer, it would have a different color that would match. And then what I'm going to do is instead of add, I just want to say subtract. Right? And so now this is being subtracted. I'm going to set my opacity to 100% again. Right? And so you can see now where she's being hidden by the horse's head and where I made some mistakes. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull these points down. I have no idea why my computer is running quite as slow as it is right now, but it is unhappy. Right? So we've been able to keyframe position and rotation. In this case, we didn't need to keyframe any of the scale. We just adjusted the scale, and we adjusted where the anchor point was. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this playhead back to the beginning. And I really only care about this part of the composition. I don't need it to play out after she stops moving. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, like all the way out. This way I can see the end of this work area. This big fat gray bar is my work area. And what I want to do is I just want to be working with the work area. So I'm just going to click on that blue handle on the end. I'm going to drag this down until about that keyframe. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the space bar to start to generate these preview frames. And as you can tell, right, it's not playing back in real time, which is probably pretty apparent. But then once it gets to the end of the work area, it will automatically loop through, and you can see there she is wandering through the background, right, going over this landscape and and carrying her flag, right? And she could continue further on across the entire page, but as I said, my computer is acting really laggy right now, so I'm going to have to fix that.